What's up guys, welcome back. Today we're going to be doing more on activity tables, but specifically we're going to be looking at dummy variables, when to use dummies, and how to kind of distinguish when you need to use one or not. So I just want to recap on two important ideas when it comes to doing activity tables. One, your network needs to be logical. So what I mean by that is it has to follow the order and logic of the precedence table. So you have to make sure that each activity that depends on another activity is actually visually represented. Otherwise, your network's not going to make sense. And also converge where possible. So we kind of stressed on this last time. If you have two kind of vertices which are not going anywhere and another activity needs to come out of these two, you need to converge these so that that can happen. So all that means is collapsing one of them. So instead of having two vertices, you've got one. But let's look at some specific examples. So hopefully you kind of get the idea. Okay, so we've got a simple enough looking activity table. So let's just start and adjust as we go. So activity A and B don't depend on anything. So I'm just going to draw that out there, A and B. Okay, next one is C depends on A. So let's just stick that here. C depends on A, that's done. Next one, D depends on A and B. Okay, so D depends on A and B. So I've got a problem here because I need to make D come out of both of these. Now if I put D out here, so far that's going to make sense because D will depend on A, okay, but it doesn't depend on B. If I put it out here, D depends on B, but it doesn't depend on A. So that's when we introduce this idea of a dummy variable. So what I can do is, I can draw D out here. So now D depends on B, but I can also draw a dummy variable like that, which shows that D not only depends on B, but depends on A. All right. So here's an important thing. These dummy variables have no weight, but in this case, there is no weight, so we can kind of ignore it. Just to make sure your logic makes sense, D depends on B, and following this arrow back, D also depends on A. So that's done. And now we need E to come out of C. So let's just stick E out here, which we do naturally. Okay, so that's done. But I've got a problem here. I can't finish my network with two vertices that go nowhere. So what I need to do is I need to collapse these two, or converge, I should say, into one vertice. So just because I'm running out of space, I can put either D down here, E down here, or I can redo D to come up there. So I think that looks a bit nicer. So I'll get rid of this. And I'll draw D to meet E. And we are done. Okay, so that's example number one. Let's look at another slightly harder example. Okay, so C here, we've got more activities, we've also got durations, and you can also see that our predecessors, which depend on nothing, are these ones here. So they're going to be the first ones we do. So A, D, and E don't depend on anything. So let's do that. A, D, and E. So they don't depend on anything. They're done. Okay, so going back to the top, now we're going to deal with B. So B depends on A. B depends on A. That's done. C depends on B and D. So C depends on B and D. So when it comes to using dummies, try be sparing. So only use it if you really need to use it. So in this case, we don't really need to stick a dummy here, which is what a lot of people would do. We can just converge these two. we can converge D and B to make C come out here. And some of you might be thinking, how would I know what to do? It's just a matter of experience, okay? So the more of these you do, the more experience you'll get, and you'll get an idea of when to use dummies and when not. But as a general rule of thumb, if you don't need a dummy, don't use it. All right, so I'm gonna redraw D to come up here. That way I can make E come out of both B and D. Oh, sorry, C. So that's done. Now I've got F, which depends on D only. Okay, so I've got F, which depends on D only. So here is where we're going to run into a problem. Let me show you. I'll just do it out here. I'll do it in a different color to make it a bit more obvious. Now, maybe pause this video and have a think about why putting F here won't work. So why is this not valid? Okay, I'll give you a minute. All right, so why is this not valid? Well, it's not valid because at the moment F depends on both D and B. But according to our activity table, F only depends on D. So the logic is a bit broken here. So we need something to fix this up. So what can we do? All right, so let's just back up here and let me get rid of this for a second. Okay, so it's clear to me that F needs to depend on D. So what if we just drew D out by itself? Like this, D, and then we'll do F like that here. Okay, so far, this makes sense. So F depends on D, okay, B depends on A, but C currently doesn't depend on B and D. So this is where it would be appropriate to put a dummy right here. That way we've got C depending on B, but also depending on D. So you'll notice what I mentioned before, you don't want to use dummies where you don't have to, but sometimes you just got to redraw it to work it out. So that's what we've got here. So that makes sense. F depends on D. And lastly, G depends on E and F. Okay, so G depends on E and F. Now I could put a dummy here. Okay, I could, but do we really need it? I don't think so, because what we can do is we can just extend E to meet F there, and we'll stick G out here. So let's fix that up. So this becomes E, and now I can do G, which depends on both F and E. Okay, that's sweet. And then lastly, like I said before, you can't have these two straggling edges. So just make sure you converge them. So let's bring C down. So I'm just going to redraw C like this, down here, and get rid of the old one. All right, so it looks a little bit complicated, but that is how you do this activity table. Okay, let's do one more. All right, let's have a look at this one. So here I've got another activity table with durations, and let's start. So A and B don't depend on anything. So let's do that like so. C depends on A, so let's stick that out here. Tick as I go. D depends on A and B. Okay, so D depends on both A and B, similar to the one we just did. So let's just try and preempt what we're going to need. So we're going to need dummy because D needs to come out of this and this. So let's try and put a dummy maybe this way and stick D out like so. So now D depends on A, but also depends on B. All right, now I've actually made a mistake. What's the mistake? So why can't I put D here? Because if I put D here, I have to put a dummy here. And if I put a dummy here, it would mean C not only depends on A, but actually depends on B. And the table actually doesn't say that. C only depends on A. So that tells me I've done something wrong. So I'm going to delete this. And instead, I'm going to put my dummy like so and stick D out here. Now D depends on B, but also depends on A. But C only depends on A, as you can see. So that there is done. Next one, E depends on D. So no problem, it looks like there. E depends on D. F depends on C and E. F depends on C and E. Once again, we could put a dummy like so and stick F out there, but you don't want to use one if you don't have to. I think we can just collapse and converge these two to make one vertice. So let's redraw C to come over here. And we'll stick F like so. So F depends on C and E. And then lastly, G depends on D. Okay, so G depends on D. So D currently is here. So I think it should be fine if we stick G here. G depend on D. But once again, you can't leave these leftover edges and vertices at the end. So make sure you converge them. So let's just redraw F to come down here and we'll finish that network off. And that is done. Okay, now obviously you can put the durations in, but I'm just going to focus on actually drawing the network today. Look, these can be tricky, and the reality is you're just going to have to do a lot of examples and a lot of practice. Do questions over and over again, even the ones that you've already done, just to get a sense of where to use dummies and where not to use dummies. That's my advice. And if you would like more content on this, let me know in the comments. But otherwise, the notes will be below, and I hope this helped. I'll see you in the next one. Peace.